Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. And today we're going to tackle the Sons of Horus. And I've long sworn off doing any 30k, Horus Heresy era stuff. But I saw this recipe the other day and I knew I had to be able to share because this actually was so simple. I'm kind of tempted to do like a small loyalist force. Maybe even just for Kill Team, who knows. But I thought this was great. I really wanted to share. Now this does use a couple of mixes, so later on when we get to the shading stage, I'm going to introduce you to, I don't know if it has a name, but Mark's Marine Juice. We've done Allie's Brown Liquid fairly recently, so Mark's Marine Juice, that might as well be the next on the list. We'll talk about that when we get to it. As always, all of the paints will be listed in the description below, so let's get our brushes and get started. So to begin with, I've primed this guy with a quick shot of the Army Painter Uniform Grey. But any grey primer will do perfectly well here. You can use your Krylon or your Halford or your Mechanicus Standard Grey. It doesn't matter. We just want something like a mid-tone grey to apply our green over. Now, I want to get a quick look at the different greens that are available for this particular style. So, now in the Citadel corner, you've got Cabalite Green and, well, Sons of Horus Green. The main difference between the pair of these tends to be, I would say, that Cabalite Green is a bit more saturated, whereas Sons of Horus Green has a slightly more sort of greyish tint to it. They are both very nice. You'll tend to find most of the painting guides out there will suggest Cabalite Green, but then Sons of Horus Green wasn't so widely available at the time. Both of these will work perfectly well for the method that I'm going to show you though, so if you do prefer the slightly richer green that these will give you, I'll just swap out all the instances where I'm going to say Gunship Green, which is this little pot over here. This is a VALLEJO colour, and it's beautiful. It's not quite as green as it looks on the bottom of the pot, but you'll see what I mean in a moment. I like the sort of stormy ocean green-grey that some of the artwork has. This, I think, is the best way to replicate that. So, like I said, you can use these two, but we're going to stick to good old Gunship Green for this. Now I've given this a really good shake, a couple of minutes, and then we'll just get a little bit of this out onto my palette. May find I need a wee touch more than that, but we'll see how we go. I'm using my Citadel large base brush for this one, and we're just going to dab a tiny wee dot of water into my brush, and then mix it in on the palette there. Right, let's go ahead and start applying this to the miniature. You do not need to be particularly careful with this at all. Okay, just go ahead and coat over the entire marine. You don't have to paint his bolter, but don't worry if you do. All of his armour in Gunship Green. Now, you will probably find this doesn't cover perfectly after one pass. So if you do need to, you can let this settle for about 5 minutes and then give it a second coat over the top. Now, after a couple of passes, what we have is a lovely green marine. You'll see I haven't really bothered with the shoulder pads for the most part because we're going to paint those a different colour. What we're going to do now though is to dry brush on our next stage, which is Administratum Grey. Now some of you might not have actually gone ahead and dry brushed with layer paints before, it dawns on me. It used to be that there was no such thing as dry paints and we just dry brushed with whatever we had when I were a lad. What I've got is one of my makeup brushes, because this is going to be perfect. We want a nice soft finish to how this goes on. So working that into my brush. You can use a small dry brush for this if you fancy, but all I'm going to do is pick out, actually flip him upside down. It's probably an easier way to get to the detail on the back of his legs here. And just give this a couple of passes, and you'll see very quickly we get a nice sharp grey edge on these things. So I'm going to go around the whole model and just lightly dust, let's say, the edges of detail with my Administratum Grey. You'll see in some areas it's easier than others, but experiment with holding your model from different angles. I see a lot of folks try and paint all the time just like this, and it's like, we have an object in three-dimensional space, and if you need to move it, you can flick it around and approach things from a different angle. I know, it's weird. But anyhow, let's go around now and fill in all of these edge details. Backpack's another really good spot for this. Now after a couple of passes around, building up that colour, this is what we've got. And it looks a little more impressive from the back, I would say. Now if you are painting, say for example, Mark IV armour, you'll find that because those smooth armour plates will pick up the dry brush as well, what you can do is grab yourself your Gunship Green again, and I'll just demonstrate on his boot here. If you want to, you can cover over some of that and very quickly sort of cheat an edge highlighting effect. So I'll do that on the other shoe as well. Shoe? Boot? Whatever. Easy as that, you can tidy those stages up. Now we'll move on and apply some Balthazar gold to, well, all of the gold areas. You will find that this goes on a little bit thin. You're probably going to need to come back and do a second coat of this. But the beautiful thing is, particularly on the shoulder pads, you don't need to be too careful when you come to this field in the middle, because we're going to be painting that black later anyhow. So around you go. Just fill in any bronzy, brassy gold areas. Now when it comes to like trim and stuff on his knees and around his neck and what have you, I've not seen like a definitive guide on how much of these guys should be gold. So really it's up to you. You just invent it, see what you like the look of. Now it will take a couple of passes to get that nice solid bronze colour, but it's well worth the work. Now in a classic example of my hobby butterfly, I went online while this was drying and I found some really cool Sons of Horus, which I think we're going to try and emulate. They do quite closely match the artwork, so instead of doing bronze, I'm going to go ahead and paint over that now with some Leadbelcher. So like the lower halves of the shoulder pads are a dark metallic. Of course we're going to paint in our bolter parts, fill those in with metal, and anywhere that you want to do metallic. So the face plates on these guys were also done in this dark metal, which is a little easier to paint without a camera in the way. Alright, there we go. We've got now his faceplate painted in there as well, along with a couple of extra details and his bolter. Now I have seen these trim done in silver as well, but I don't think, we're looking for ways to cut down the amount of time it's going to paint these guys, so let's not make work for ourselves. Speaking of which, I've got here some black, and if you've ordered some Gunship Grey, go ahead and get yourself some VALLEJO flat black at the same time, because this stuff covers like nobody's business. No great surprise, we're now going to fill in all of the black areas. And same as with, the silver and the gold and what have you, really there's a lot of freedom on how you want these guys to look. So any black bits you want now, fill them in. And then we're pretty much done with the painting. Now that's all of our base coats done. I have seen some folks do the neck ring or the gorget in black as well, but I'm going to skip that. Again, we're looking for ways to save time. What we need to do now is actually varnish them. We want to change how our shade is going to react to the surface of this model. So what we'll do is I'm going to spray them with VALLEJO's gloss varnish, but any old gloss will work for this. You can go ahead and brush it on as well, if that's what you've got. Now, oh my goodness, that is so bright. The difficulty with gloss varnish is actually telling when it's dry. So I recommend once you've sprayed this on or brushed it on, go ahead and leave this for half an hour. Just walk away, go do something else. Now the reason why we varnished it is because ordinarily a shade will run into the recesses and all the nooks and crannies of the model, but sometimes it can stain some of the flatter areas, and for this reason, the varnish is going to help us. It basically stops that happening, right? So we don't have to come back and, repaint the green or touch up our highlights. What I've got here, this little pot, this is some of Mark Bedford's suggested mix. Now Mark Bedford, he's with the Forge World team, and he has painted so many Space Marines over the years, so I thought I'd give this a try, and it works pretty well. This is 1 part Nuln Oil, 1 part Reikland Fleshshade, and 1 part Lahmian Medium. So if you like how this looks and you want to paint a whole lot of Marines, just get a big pot, bish bash bosh, add all 3. But I've mixed these up. Now, to be completely honest, If you wanted to, you want to avoid mixing anything, you could probably get away with just using some Agrax Earthshade here. But this mix is going to help us by giving a nice, subtle shade. Ooh, that's nice. And we're going to be fairly generous with that over the whole model. Now, once our shade is dried, this is what we've got. And isn't that something? As easy as just bashing one huge wash over everything. What a winner. I'm really pleased with how that's come out. Nice and subtle, it's shaded all the recesses, but it's not so dark that it's changed the color of the armor any, which is perfect. What I'm going to do now is actually hit it with a matte varnish, because you'll still see some of the shine through in a few spots. So I'm going to grab my VALLEJO matte varnish can and give that a shake. Now with that matte varnish dried, oh my goodness, what a difference it makes. That is ready to go ahead and put on the table. Base them up. There's the bulk of your army done. Short of doing his eyes, I would say. But let's take it just a little bit further. And I've got here again my Administratum grey. And a nice small brush for this. What we'll do is, instead of using the tip of our brush to highlight the edge of his bolter, we're going to use the edge and we'll just flick along the edges of that black detail. Then we'll get a little bit of Liberator gold and we'll do exactly the same thing along the brassy bits. I'd suggest you want to be fairly sparing with this. But of course, your models, you decide how you think it looks good. Now you could also paint some light silver around the edges of the Leadbelcher, but I don't think you need to. What I'm going to do though is get my nice fine brush, and I'm going to, this will be easier if I flip them upside down. I keep forgetting to try that. Let's paint in, very carefully, these eyes with just straight white. That thing happened again. I'm concentrating, so I'm whispering. Now once you've done that, wait for that to dry, and I've got here a contrast color. This is Flesh Tearer's Red. And I'm going to go ahead and apply this directly into the sockets over the white. Very carefully. Yep. Let's just... Yeah, there we go. That's fine. What I'll do is get just a little bit of Leadbelcher, try and find where that's focusing, and we'll just tidy up carefully along the edge there. There we go, watch spill. Now that is a pretty fancy looking marine. What I'm going to do is go ahead and pop a base on them, and we'll get them all in context, call them finished. And with that, at last, our Son of Horus is complete. Now I've got to admit, I really like how this came out, eh? If you were to paint a whole army like this, even though it's a very simple method, I think they're going to look fantastic on the table. Just one last reminder that you can, of course, swap in those other two greens that I mentioned and get a very different effect, but the actual techniques will not change. All you're going to do is dry brush, gloss varnish, and then shade with a bit of a mix. As always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of the patrons who helped make these videos possible, including producers Alan Nuttall, Ben Hicks, Kyrie Crawford, and Trainboy. So any questions or anything, guys, feel free, drop them in the old comments box below. My Twitter and Facebook are both linked there too. So thank you very much for your time, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.